Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to begin by giving all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and to the apostle of the millstone, and then our respect to the brothers out there pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, I wanted to do a quick lesson on this article. And Lord willing, this be edifying. But before I get into this article, I want to begin with the book of Psalms, the second chapter. Beginning with verse 1, it says, "Why do the heathen rage, and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth, they set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord Yahweh, and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder, and cast away their cords from us." All right, let's read that in the NIV. It's concerning the heathens. "Why do the nations conspire and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles." Okay? Because, when these heathens, they see the way the world is, the direction in which the world is heading, and they can't help but face the fact that in a short while, everything that they have worked for, everything that they have built and bled for, it's going to be what? It's going to be destroyed. That's why they're trying their very hardest to not have to fight World War III in its full destructive capabilities. But the scripture says that what? While they plot and they plan to break off the chains that the Lord has over them, it says that one enthroned in the heavens laughs, and the Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger, and he terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountains. All right, matter of fact, let's get that in the KJV. Psalms 2 and 4 says, "He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision, confusion. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure." All right. So what is this derision here? When we look at this word in its modern sense, derision means, mockery or ridicule. And the Lord is gonna mock them by having them in situations where they do nothing but live the narrative of prophecy. And so this article here, which is entitled "The Sky Will Determine the Outcome of This War," I think it's very interesting because when you go into the book of Revelations, the 12th chapter, for example, it says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragons fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. The point here is that, there's going to be an emphasis, there's going to be an intense war fought, even though Esau is going to have his armies on land. The fight against, Yahweh Shai, when they seek to fight Yahweh Shai, the bulk of their might is going to be in the heavens, right, according to prophecy. And so I think this is very interesting because when the war in Ukraine mentions sky being the ultimate decision of war, when you read, I always reference this website, the Institute of the Study of War. When you go into contemporary and future warfare, and you look up overview, it tells you right here, right, that the war in Ukraine is transforming the character of war in ways that will affect all future wars. The United States and its allies and partners must understand and internalize the lessons of this war and rapidly adapt themselves in order to address the fundamental problems of contemporary warfare that the war in Ukraine is exposing. You understand why this is very interesting now. I mean, I hope right now you understand. Okay, that's why this isn't old news. The Russian-Ukraine war, it shouldn't be old news. The Lord has so many pieces on his chessboard, but don't neglect to pay attention to all of them. And don't feel as though you know everything that's going on. Try to keep watching. Your job is to be a watchman. So it says here that the war in Ukraine, it's transforming the way in which war is fought. These fundamental problems are not confined to the combatants in this conflict, to the specific theaters in which they are fighting, or to their particular capabilities and limitations. The more advanced technologies and systems that the United States, NATO, and China, among others, can field neither automatically resolve these problems nor render them obsolete. And so the path to success militarily, like it says, the path to successful military adaptation runs through Ukraine. All right. So as the war is going on, all these nations, they're watching, because this is modern warfare, right? Post-World War II, this isn't a war that's fought between a supergiant and a third world country no one's ever heard of. This isn't a small group of Marines fighting against, a corrupt dictator. This is Western warfare, okay? Two capable nations fighting with drones and missiles and tanks and holding ground. And the whole world is watching, trying to figure out, do we have obsolete weapons? Is our technology up to date? Do we have to start creating new things and figuring out how to advance our military? And they're using the war in Ukraine as a simulation. It's to them, that's what it is. So what happens when it says the sky will determine the outcome of this war? What happens when it is decided that the heavens is the ultimate way to win a battle? What do you think these nations will do then? That's when prophecy comes into play. Then they start what? Because right now they already have the jets. But what happens when they start building, these space forces? You think they have an air force now? Wait until they decide that the advancement of warfare is completely going to be in the air. Wait, and then you see how far they can go into it, how far they can advance their air force. What you see as people having now, that's not the army that's going to be fighting a fight so intense that it's going to be recognized from generation to generation. Even though it's powerful, there's much more to come. So prophecy, talks about the intense war in heaven against Yahushua, which they're going to lose miserably, right? So it is by this kind of battle that, the great serpent, which is Esau, shall be cast down. So now let's go into this article. Not that now that, we know what we're looking for. We're going to read the article and find out exactly, what how the world is going to learn from the war in Ukraine. So it says Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky stated that the decisive phase of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has shifted from land and sea to the air, making a battle in the sky the determining factor of the war. In an interview with the Financial Times on July 6, Zelensky emphasized that land territory seas now holds far less significance because Ukraine has entered the aerial sphere and is already competitive within it. The president noted that Ukraine's ability to manufacture and deploy long-range drones has transformed the warfare landscape because of the air. When you have air superiority, you don't have to worry about holding you don't have to worry about holding down a territory. You can fly over shit. You can hit it. You don't have to worry about cover. You can just fly fast, drop some bomb, and get the hell out of Dodge. So the only way to counter that is to have a plane that's, is to have your own jet, your own fighter jet. And then before you know it, when Yahushua gets here, they would have fulfilled this prophecy, right? So it says, the book of Revelation, the 19th chapter, verse 11, it says, "And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew but himself. So this is talking about Yahushua. And then when it goes down to verse 19, it says, "And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army." The horse represents power. That's just the chariot. And against his army, which is the angels of the Lord, Michael included. So all these nations are, by the time Yahushua gets on the scene, they would have a very powerful, air force. Not that they're gonna be, that they're gonna be able to contend with Yahushua, but in the eyes of men, they're gonna have a great army that is primarily air base. Okay. So they're figuring out that the war isn't being fought right. Whether they fight it on sea or land, it ain't really doing much. The only time at which, they make progress is when they shift their focus to air dominance. So it says, in an interview with the Financial Times on July 6, Zelensky emphasized that the land territory seized now holds far less significance because Ukraine has entered the aerial sphere and is already competitive within it. The president noted that Ukraine's ability to manufacture... we'll read this. Zelensky outlined specific conditions required to secure this aerial turning point, linking international financial support and defensive resilience to the upcoming shift in the sky. Man, the Most High is beautiful, man. He works in ways that is just beautiful. It says, "Today I believe that victory in this war belongs to the one who is smarter. If you stop the enemy on the battlefield, if you stop the war on land, and if you deprive him of dominance at sea, as we did with our naval drones pushing back the Russian fleet, the next battle will be the sky." All right. If our partners do not abandon Ukraine financially, if our soldiers continue to hold the front, if every kilometer of Russian advance continues to cost them tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of personnel, then the decisive battle would take place in the sky. Okay? Now, this is all in line with prophecy also, right? That the war that Russia starts, in the overview of the Russian-Ukraine war, it tells you that, Russia started this thing. They are waging war, right? President Vladimir Putin is waging a war of conquest to reestablish a Russian empire and to overturn the post-Cold War international order. And he is going to accomplish this. He is going to, have this, despite what we see, right? We trust what the word of the Lord says as opposed to what we see on the news. And although this news is telling us that Russia is losing miserably, we know that they're not going to be defeated, right? Or even if they abandon this war, they are going to grow in numbers. They're going to make allies. They're going to be a strength, right? They're going to be so much so that they can be a guard unto the nations. So at one point or another, Russia's going to be strong. And all articles like this telling you that they are losing and they don't know how to fight, eventually it's not going to matter very much, all right? But even though, right, the war is taking longer than they had anticipated, right, the word of the Lord is still going to be put into effect, okay? So says previously, Zelensky announced that Ukraine had developed upgraded long-range drones capable of striking targets at distance of up to 3,000 kilometers, highlighting the country's expanding deep strike capabilities against Russian military and industrial infrastructure. According to Zelensky's address, the new capability was demonstrated during long-range operations against targets inside Russia, including a strike on infrastructure in the Tyumen region, which significantly impacted Russian military, logistics, and energy facilities. And there's also another thing that's a topic that I had made a video on a while back, showing how in the beginning of a war, they always want to keep it minimal, right? And only attack the military logistics, so transportation, bridges, energy facilities. But eventually, they find out that when they destroy these things, the war still goes on. Then the whole thing just escalates into an all-out war. And this is exactly what we keep seeing over and over and over again. All right? So I think this is very interesting because of what I had read, on this website, stating that the Russian-Ukraine war is, let's see, the toughest problem in warfare is often driven, the toughest problem in warfare often drives military experimentation, adaptation, and technological innovation. Ukraine is the defining battlefield shaping the future of warfare, a proven ground where the character of war is changing in real time, from drone swarms and electric warfare to dispersed command structures and hybrid operations. The dynamics unfolding in Ukraine are rewriting the rules of modern conflicts. All right, so again, you can go to this website, and it's some very interesting things on there. You can learn it for yourself if you'd like. But yeah, that's pretty much it on that. In closing, I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakha Hudash, and Shalom Yahweh Bashim Shabrakatham to Yakim Sinakwivs that are listening in truth and sincerity. May the blessing of blessing be upon the house. And until next time, Shalom.